Hi, welcome to Leaf River Pottery's Lake Life webinar. Today we're going to be painting our Lake Life plate or platter. Depends on what shape you may have chosen. But you'll be starting with a blank piece of pottery, and you should have a variety of paint pots with numbers on them. If your paint pots have a number followed by a W, that means that they have already been mixed with water and you do not need to mix. They've been pre-mixed. What you do need by you though are all your paint pots, your sheet, your information sheet, a water bowl with some water, an assortment of brushes, a pencil, and probably some paper towels. Okay, I apologize for the shadows on this video. Normal studio space is unavailable today, so I had to do this video in a different location, and I'm trying to eliminate the shadows as much as possible. All right, so once everybody's set up, you can always pause this video. I should say that to start off. You can always pause this video to get caught up. I've been told I go pretty fast. I am trying to slow down, but please pause it if you need to so you can get caught up to where I'm at. Okay, also, most of my paints are going to be in bottles like this. I make this project quite often, and so I just have pre-mixed bottles, so I will not be using very many of the paint pots today, but you can work directly out of your paint pots. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to start with a fan brush. Right, I like to get my fan brush wet, but then I actually tap it off on the paper towels to remove any extra water. And we'll be starting with our color of 2313. So that should be a dark brown. So I'm going to pour some of my 2313 right into this dish. All right, this is our background color, and this has been diluted already. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint one coat, just one coat, and I'm going to paint all in one direction, horizontally across my piece of pottery. So just like this. My pottery has a little bit of an edge, so I'm going to do my best to keep those drips from accumulating. If I see one to start, I just go back over and give it a brush stroke, and it should take care of itself. All right, so just make sure you get one coat in one direction. Just like that. So while this looks really pretty dark at the moment, you have to keep in mind that it has been watered quite a bit, and we will be adding colors over the top. Okay, and you can see that it dries pretty fast because pottery is very porous. So I have my one coat on. I'm going to set my brown color aside. And next, I'm going to use my pencil, and I'm going to draw in the areas that I want to be my wood planks. So what we're going to do is, I should have said you should probably have a ruler too accessible, or even the edge of your paper works. I like just to have some sort of straight edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my platter and make a little tiny pencil line on the edge of where I want my first center line. We're going to draw a center line, and then we're going to divide the two halves that we create. We're going to divide those in half again. So I'm just going to lay out my straight edge. It looks about right. And I'm going to sketch a little line. I'm sketching very lightly. And it doesn't have to be exact. We don't want it to be exact. Wood planking's not exact. And then I'm going to divide this again. About like that. Again, sketch another little line. Just a very light line. Just like that. And actually, I don't like where that line is. So I can just do this with my finger. Gets rid of that line. A little blow. And I'm going to move it down just a little bit more. There we go. And then the same on the other half. My straight edge lined up where I want it. Just follow it along to make a nice little line. Perfect. So now that I have those lines in there, I'm going to use the handle of my fan brush, this pointy handle edge. I'm going to turn my plate so the lines are vertical for me, and I'm going to scratch into this layer of paint with my handle to kind of make a groove over the top of my pencil line. I'm just gonna freehand this because I don't want it to be perfect. And I just push down and scratch right into that paint. There we go. And one more time over here. If it's not scratching in too well, use your fan brush and just put some water onto your plate or platter, and it will re-moisten that paint and allow you to just carve into it ever so lightly. Just like that. And then the last one. There we go. Let's get rid of some of those paint shavings. Okay, so now I have 3 lines, and I've divided my platter into 4 planks. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now we can move right on to the next step. We are going to paint our planks in various colors. And the paint again has all been pre-mixed. So I'm going to paint my first plank and my third plank. I like to let them dry just a little bit before I do the very adjacent. So I'm going to start with plank number 1, which is at the top of my plate. And that is the number 2398. So you want to open your paint pot for number 2398. In my case, I'm going to pour some into a little dish. Oops, I have the wrong paint. I have 2323. Here we go. 2398. All right, and I'm going to pour some into the dish. Okay, again, you can work straight out of your paint pot. I'm going to take my fan brush again, and with this time I'm going to do the exact same thing we did with the brown, except I'm going to do 2 coats, and I'm going to stay within plank number 1. Okay, but I'm going to continue to paint only horizontally. So 2 coats of 2398 on the top plank. And I'm actually going to let it dry between coats, and I will go paint the third plank. So I'm getting close to that groove, probably not exact, but as close as I can freehand without really stressing too much how exact it is. Again, I'm checking for drips in my corners or anywhere that the paint might pool. There we go, that's one coat. So on plank number 3, I'm going to use 23-23. So that's the one I had started to pour. 23-23, so I just rinse out my fan brush, dry it back off, and go ahead and dip into paint pot number 23-23, and I'm going to paint plank number 3. Again, I'm very unstructured, I guess, when it comes to just painting up to that line. It doesn't have to be exact. All right, and then get your edges and remove any drips. Perfect. I'm going to rinse out my brush again and go back to number 2398 and put my second coat on my top plank. So rinse out your brush, dry it off, and then go ahead and go back to 2398 and put your second coat on plank number 1. Okay. And depending on your plate shape, you might have those drips in certain areas, so just really watch for that because they will show up very well. Get my edges. A little bit more right there. And done. All right, so I can set 2398 aside because we are done with that color. We'll go back to number 2323 and put our second coat on plank number 3. So rinse out your brush, dry it off, and go ahead and get some paint for plank number 3. Make sure I got my edges. And right up to that edge. Got some drip marks coming here, so I'm just gonna fade them into the rest of the plank. Just like that. And now I'm done. So now we're done with 2323. Go ahead and set that color aside. All right, so now we're gonna go to plank number 2. And plank number 2 is 2399. So you wanna open paint pot number 2399. And we're gonna repeat the process that we just did, but instead of planks 1 and 3, we're gonna use planks 2 and 4. So rinse out your brush, go ahead and dry it off, and then go ahead and paint one coat horizontally on plank number 2 with color 2399. So you can see that I'm not actually meeting my colors, that division of the line that we sketched or etched into the brown color. I'm leaving that open to divide my planks. So I get close, but not all the way, not exact. Right? Make sure you get your edges. And clean up any drip marks. And then we're done. And plank number 4. Plank number 4 should be color number 2395. And that should be a gray, 2395. So I rinsed out my brush, I dried it off, and now I'm going to paint plank number 4. You can see that it's already starting to take on a weathered look, kind of a beachy, distressed, sun-faded look. And that's what we're going for. Okay. Get this corner, a little bit awkward angle on this shape of a platter. That looks pretty good. And now I'll go back and do my second coat with the 2399 on plank number 2. Just make sure you rinse out your brush between each color so that you don't cross-contaminate and end up with multicolors in your planks. Edges. And I have some drips. There we go. All right. So now I am done with 2399. I'll rinse my brush and go back to 2395, the gray color, for my second coat on plank number 4. Just like that. Check my edges. A couple drips. Okay, so now we're done with 2395. So in some of the places I may have got a little too close to that line. Normally that's okay because we are going to add a paint color there. However, you can also go back to the etching part and just scrape through that area again where the two colors are coming close together, and it will remove any of the overlap. And I just blow away the paint shavings. Again, we don't want these perfect, not exactly straight, because these are the edge of our boards, and they are by far not perfect. Just like that. I'll touch up the middle one. And the last one. All the way over that edge. And this side, and I'm gonna check these. There we go. So if you think they're pretty good, you can stick with just the dark brown in there. We don't have to add a color, and actually mine look pretty good. So I think I'm gonna skip adding a paint color in there because I like the idea of just the dark brown showing through. Blow away those paint shavings, and we're good. So now we've completed the basic coloring of our boards. What we are gonna do now is add some, actually I'm gonna keep it this way. We're gonna add some of our darker brown, not the darkest brown, but 2372. All right, you're gonna refer to paint pot number 2372. Okay, and it looks like mine has not been watered down, so I'm gonna mix a little bit of this in here. Add some water. And I'm just gonna stir this up. So you can see that I have 2372, maybe just a little too much water. Yours should probably be pre-mixed. So just open paint pot number 2372. Okay, and for this application, I'm going to use a small brush. So one of the littlest brushes you have. Tiny little brush. I always like to get my brush wet first and tap it on the paper towel. And now I'm gonna load some of this paint on it. We don't need a lot, but what we're gonna do is we're just going to freehand some wood grain. All right, it's very simple. It's very inexact. All right, so you can just pick a board. So I'll start right here with this one here, plank number 3, I guess it is. And I'm just going to use my little brush and just make some general little squigglies. They don't have to even line up. They don't have to be connected. Just adding a little bit of dimension to your boards. Okay, it's very random and inexact. Sometimes I even like to add a little bit of a knot, so I can go from the edge of the plank and just make a little bit of a squiggly circle, and then I fill that in with a second line. And maybe one more in there. Just like that. So we're just adding random lines, some long, some short, to create wood grain. Once you're comfortable or like what you see in terms of the wood grain on your plank, just move on and repeat the process on the remaining 3 planks. Make sure you carry some at least off the edge of the platter so it doesn't look like you've framed it. Get some of those to go all the way off. Adding a very light-handed design to your wood planks. and I have one plank left. And I think that looks pretty good. Very light coloring to that. All right, so now I'm going to rinse out my little brush and I'm going to move on to a medium brush. Now with the medium brush, I'm going to get it wet, dry it off, and I'm going to put it in that same color. I'm going to load it up pretty good. All right, I don't want the paint to be dripping off the brush, but I want the brush to have quite a bit of paint in there. And I'm going to gently tap it and just make a few, just very random splatters. Very few. Just like that. I'm not sure how well that shows up on video, but you can see that I've made a few splatters and you can see my wood grain. Okay? Okay, so now I'm done with the 2372. I'm rinsing out my brush, closing up all my paint cups. I'm just giving my platter just a moment to dry so I can move on to the next step. So I'll close up all my paint cups. The last color we have to use is the 2300, which will be your white. So you can clean up your workspace a little bit. Oops, this goes this way. So as this dries, which it is pretty dry already, I'm gonna take my Lake Life graphic and I'm gonna take my blue transfer paper. Now in the corners of your blue transfer paper, it will say this side up. Make sure you have that side up or you will not get a transfer. All right, I'm just gonna stack them evenly, just like 2 sheets of paper. And I'm going to figure out where I wanna position my Lake Life graphic. Okay, so I just move it around on the platter until I find the spot that I like. So I'm just gonna get this kind of centered here. About like that. I think that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to use my pencil and I'm going to trace over the Lake Life. I'm just going to do the outline. I don't need to color it all in, but I'm just going to trace the outline of the words Lake Life. You may have a different graphic. Maybe you have cabin life or farm life. Whatever your graphic is, now's the time where we're gonna trace over it. Okay, so I got my graphic centered and I'm going to just hold it in place with one hand while I trace over the outline with the other, right? Don't be afraid to press a little bit hard. It doesn't have to be super hard, but don't press too lightly or you will not be able to see your transfer. All right, and now just trace each letter as you see it. If you go off a little bit, don't worry about it. Just make a correction. Okay, big trick is to not move your paper. So just kind of always have at least one hand on your paper holding it into place. So there I have lake done. Now I want to move down to life. Oops, my pencil just broke. There we go. Okay, my pencil broke. I'll be right back. I gotta grab another one. All right, sorry about that. Continue tracing my graphic. So you can see on the L that I kind of got away from my graphic a little bit. So I just went back in and redrew the correct line, and I will just ignore the line that got too wide. Finish off my E, just like that. So now before I lift up my graphic, I like to make sure I see that I got each location, because it will be more difficult to line it back up. Looks good, I'll lift it up. And now my words or my graphic are now on my plate. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but it is in fact on there. And now I basically have created a color book outline for me to paint in. Okay. So this is where I'm going to use, sometimes I'm going to use my small brush, sometimes I might use my medium brush, depending on what I'm most comfortable with. But I'm going to open my 2300. Okay, now this color has not been watered down. This is a full strength color. I'm just gonna work straight from the paint pot. And I'm going to paint 3 coats. This is the tedious part. 3 coats of white on my lake life wording. So I usually like to do an outline first and then fill in the color. And coat 1 is always the slowest because that's where you're creating your lines to follow. Okay, and I'm a heavy painter, so make sure that you're painting 3 strong coats. We want the lake life part or your wording to really pop, and if your coats are not thick enough, the colors underneath, the brown and the board colors, are gonna bleed through and really show up through that white paint. So there you go. I have the first letter done. I have a coat on my L. Tighten up this line a little bit. Sometimes if I go outside the line, I just widen my letter slightly to make it nice and straight. Just like that. now I'm just going to, I just rinse out my brush between letters just because I don't like it to get all gunked up with paint. And I'll move on to my second letter. So when I'm scripting, which is basically what we're doing here, I often like to have my paint thinned out just a little bit. I think I'm gonna do that. I don't add a lot. I add almost no water. But if it doesn't feel like it's flowing off my brush and I'm really having to do a lot of going back over areas, I add just a tiny bit of water just to thin out my paint color to make it more smooth. Let's put the cap back on and give it a shake. And let's try again. Oh yeah, that's much better. You can see how it's just flowing on now. So for the purposes of the video, I'm just going to do one coat on my lake life because the video, actually we will be done, but you need to actually do 3 coats. Okay, so I'm done with my A. There we go, and now I'm done with the K. And now I'm done with the E. So my whole lake word has 1 coat of white on it. Before when I said if you have, you don't need to add a color to define your lines. If you did want to add a color to define your lines, the color that we use is the 2272, and you would just draw a line with 2272, similar to what we did when we were adding a little bit of wood grain to the boards. But really you don't need it if you do that scraping method because it will show that dark color through. So now I'm moving on to the word life. And remember on my L, I kind of made a wider line when I was tracing. So I see two lines here on my letter L, but I remembered that I did that, so I'm gonna follow the inner line because I don't want it to get too wide like I did when I was tracing it. It's not important to be exact. I mean, you're trying to follow your lines pretty closely, but if you can still see your transfer line, that's okay. That will fire away in the kiln. So any pencil lines or transfer lines that you may still see, because they did not get covered by paint, that's all right, you don't need to worry about them. Okay, just finishing up my F. Go. Now I just have the E left. Go. Oh, I see a spot I missed on the K, so I'm gonna go back and touch that up. Just like that. Okay, so now my lake life has one coat of white. I need to go around or go back and do it 2 more times to give it that nice thick layer of paint. But I won't do that for the video since you've already seen me do that. Once I'm done with that, I usually like to let it dry for a few minutes, but then I'm going to flip it over and autograph my art on the back. If you see paint splatters or paint drips on the back, don't worry about it, because when I get your platter, I'm going to sand all of this off so that you have a nice white, crisp and clean back, okay? I have a little bit of blue right there and a little bit of brown right there, but I'll sand that all off and get it so it's just the nice white color of the bisque. Okay, so at this point in time, You probably want to use one of your colors that you used on your planks or the dark brown, and go ahead and just write your initials or maybe the year, whatever you'd like it to say, right on the back of your platter. And then that is it. Once you've done that, you've completed the class. I want to thank everyone for watching the video, and I hope you enjoy your platter. Thanks much. Bye-bye.